One of the most interesting developments we've seen in the business world over the last few years has been the creation of new kinds of business models in different parts of the world that we never would have imagined just a few years ago. And they've taken us all by surprise. When we see these new kinds of business models being created in different parts of the world, they're innovations that could not have been created anywhere else. They couldn't have been created in the Silicon Valley, for example, because they're solving problems that are unique to other parts of the world. The world, in a way, has become, because of globalization, a laboratory for inventing new business logics. Technologies are moving all over the world, so that different kinds of people in different cultures all have access to information. They have access to technology. They have access to knowledge about businesses. But the particular problems that businesses are solving are very different. I think the way we want to think about entrepreneurship in the world environment right now is that the old conception that we see business models that are born in innovative places like a Silicon Valley, and then we take those and play kind of business model arbitrage with the rest of the world. There are gains to be made from that kind of arbitrage, but they're actually quite limited compared to immersing ourselves in the context of other places and seeing what potential they hold. I remember being in Baja California Sur. So many people in the audience may have been to Cabo and so forth for vacations. But if you go inland and go into the rural areas there are several companies, but there was one innovative company that moved there to make soap out of the cactus. And the soap made from that cactus does a tremendous job cleaning sheets without using bleach. And it turns out this is then a big hit in the hotel business worldwide. So while it was born of Baja California Sur, because they have all this cactus, it was a product that could be used everywhere. And of course, once you see it used there, you realize, well, now there's another crop or another product that can be made from cactus other than tequila in the form of this soap. And of course, the entrepreneur involved has been tremendously successful from it. But you wouldn't think of that if you were in any other context. So many of the new entrepreneurial ventures we see going on in the world are very much a product of the context within which these organizations are born. If you take Taobao, for example, part of Alibaba in China, when they were first getting started, they're in the consumer-to-consumer and the business-to-consumer internet space, very similar to eBay or some parts of it to Amazon.com. But when they were trying to get started, they quickly realized that the lack of having a base of consumers who use credit cards was making their life very difficult. Meanwhile, eBay had PayPal, Amazon obviously uses credit cards. Much of the rest of the internet world was able to rely on a customer base in places like Western Europe or the United States, where many people had a credit card. Millions and millions of consumers in China did not have credit cards. Now, they are getting them at an increasing pace, but they still lag behind, especially when compared to their increasing purchasing power. So Alibaba and Jack Ma, his team, in finding a solution to the credit card problem, came up with Alipay, very much in the same way that MercadoLibre in Brazil, although it's based in Argentina, its operations are mainly in Brazil and other parts of Latin America. MercadoLibre similarly came up with Mercado Pago. Both of those innovations are aimed at helping people who do not have credit cards get access to internet commerce. So you can go into a little town in the middle of Brazil. I saw one of these in Piracicaba, which is like out of a movie. You expect to see the good, the bad, and the ugly, and there's sort of dust rising. And I go into this little shop, and there's someone making a purchase with cash, which the person at the counter then is inserting into the database of Mercado Pago so that they can then make an internet purchase with someone online. Well, they didn't have a credit card and they didn't have access to the internet. Similarly, in China, Alipay has grown into a fearsome organization when it comes to essentially banking the unbanked. Now, we would not have thought of that as the reason that Alibaba had come to exist. When people were initially excited about Alibaba, they figured they were excited about Alibaba because of e-commerce, C2C and B2C, and all the other acronyms you hear about when we're talking about e-commerce. And of course, they've been successful on that front. But there was a new business model also developed out of that because they ran into unique challenges in that context. You look in Brazil and you see a retail chain organization known as Magazine Luiza, which looks very different than any kind of mass retailer you would have in most other parts of the world. And if you go in, as I would advise you to do sometime, if you're ever in Brazil and you go into a Magazine Luiza, you see lower middle class consumers making their first major purchase of an appliance, typically for the home, maybe a refrigerator, very proud, perhaps dressed in their suit that they would otherwise only wear to church, making this purchase, using the internet sometimes for the first time. They're in the store with the guidance of an associate who's also proud that she has that job, and that makes her stand out in terms of her family and their socioeconomic status. These are symptoms that you see in an economy where millions and millions of people have been brought out of poverty in the last few years. It's a business model that's set up around serving a consumer that would typically be ignored by most retailers because of their lack of credit. And that being able to solve that one problem has made Magazine Luiza and many other organizations like them incredibly successful, in this case in Brazil. The American retailers, European retailers, the high-end retailers from much of the rest of Latin America have not touched these consumers. Most of the world's really interesting businesses were not planned in a room. They were discovered in the process of trying to implement a plan that never really worked, but instead morphed into something else that was much more fantastic than the original plan ever would have predicted. And many of the people watching this video might have an experience with that. They might think that's an exceptional experience. In fact, the lives of businesses are very much like the lives of people. They unfold in a way that's almost haphazard at times because of the tremendous amount of uncertainty that we face. And just like the life of a person does not read like a resume, neither does the life of a business read like a strategic plan. Instead, it typically unfolds as things are discovered along the way and as leadership comes to identify opportunities that maybe they didn't see at first, and then change the organization to seize those opportunities and become greater than they ever could have been. So what we're seeing in some of the most innovative firms is that leadership focuses less on planning and much more on that process of discovery. If you want to look at it this way, discovery trumps planning. And so good leadership often plans to discover and looks at that innovation process as where they put their focus when they're leading their organization. I sometimes now look at businesses that are solidly Silicon Valley businesses, and I've been teaching entrepreneurship in the Silicon Valley now for about 20 years. It's been a lot of years seeing businesses formed here. Increasingly, I'm seeing Silicon Valley firms being self-referential, a lot of focus on consumer internet, a lot of focus on the kinds of problems that people in this very elite group of well-educated entrepreneurs see as important problems. And not so much of an attention being paid to the tremendous gains that can be made from solving problems that come up in other parts of the world. One of the things we do have in innovative places like Silicon Valley that is still needed in many other parts of the world is that larger infrastructure of institutions, from finance to law, supportive business knowledge, and so forth, that allows for a process of failure in the effort to get to the end result. Most businesses fail. The most innovative business contexts are marked by large numbers of failures. But unfortunately, many parts of the world still see failure as something that carries a great deal of stigma with it. As most people know, if you go to the Silicon Valley, failure is a normal part of life. Of course, people don't want to fail. Everyone wishes their innovations could immediately be successful, but it's well understood that the road to success is often marked by a series of failures. Of course, in many parts of the world, once you have a failure, your career is forever marred by that. And the shame that goes with that is often very difficult. So what we need to be able to do is take the business necessity that we see being created in many different parts of the world and combine that with a tolerance for the innovation process and all its messiness that we see in places like the Silicon Valley.